evening and welcome to Tomorrow's World. Now, as you can see, I'm not in the studio tonight, but live from British Telecom's new Network Management Centre in London. Now, this really is a master control system for virtually all of Britain's telephone network, and it has to deal with breakdowns and overloads that might occur during sudden emergencies. Well, tonight, we are going to put it to the test. Now, if you were watching BBC One half an hour ago, you'll remember that we asked you to join us in an experiment that has never been done before. We asked you a simple question. Should we have British summertime all year round? Phone one phone number for yes, phone another one for no. Don't call them now, though, because those lines are closed. Well, later in the show, we'll see the result of that experiment and, in the process, see some of the remarkable ways that this nerve centre works.
Thanks a lot, Howard. And we're hoping that all those calls will turn out to be the biggest telephone vote ever, so stick around for that result. Also in tonight's programme, Maggie sits for the robot artist with a very light touch, and Howard goes shopping with the intelligent trolley. But first, though, here comes Judith.
This twin-trailer lorry is nearly 60 feet long, which makes it the biggest bread van in Britain. Every day, it carries over 10,000 loaves into the city of Birmingham. But there's something else unusual about this lorry that at first you probably wouldn't notice.
Well, this is the bit to look at, the join between the lorry and the trailer, and you'll see that there's only about a foot between them. Now, this close coupling gives the whole rig much better aerodynamics and greater stability, which minimises the risk of jackknifing when braking hard. So, it seems like the ideal solution. The only problem is, how does it go around the corners without scrunching the containers together? Well, this coupling does it by getting longer or shorter as it goes along. Underneath here, there's a simple gearing system which will push this trailer from this position here, in line with that line, right the way back here on a full lock. So how does it do it? Well, over here we can see exactly what's going on. Now, this block at the front here represents the A-frame, or coupling, attached to the lorry, and this end is the bit that's bolted to the front of the trailer. Now, when the lorry turns, that movement drives these cogs here, which in turn pushes this connecting rod, so extending the coupling so that the two halves don't crash into each other. So, let's see it in action. Give it a whirl, Judith. Now, as soon as Judith starts to turn, you can see that this part of the trailer is pulling back here. In fact, it's now about halfway to its maximum distance back. And the vital thing to look at is the gap between the lorry and trailer. They're just far enough apart to make sure that they will never ever crash.
The system will also work on conventional articulated lorries between the tractor and trailer units. Right, now here's Maggie taking her seat for a very unusual type of scan.
Sit here, please. Now I want you to stay calm and don't move for 15 seconds. You won't feel a thing. It's quite harmless, okay?
Right.
Now, here we go.
Quite painless. Well, as you may have guessed from the hairstyle, I'm not here for a medical scan. No, I'm here to be immortalised. That laser went right the way around my head, and now every hair, every facial detail is stored in an image processor. And the idea is to use that information to sculpt me in bronze, just like this vaguely familiar character here. Now, normally, a subject would need to sit for at least a couple of hours, perhaps even a couple of days. And during that time, the sculptor would just be getting the vague shape of the head right. He wouldn't even have started to work on the finer details. Well, as you saw, I sat just for a few seconds, and the computer should take care of the bulk of the sculptor's work. Now, first, I have to check that I'm happy with the pose. Goodness, I didn't realise my nose was quite as big as that. There we go. The vertical lines correspond to reflections which have been picked up as the laser has moved around my head. And there's now a complete three-dimensional recording of my head on this disc. The disc is then used to guide a computer-controlled milling machine as it carves away at a solid block of foam plastic. At this stage, the scale of the finished bust is chosen. It turns out that a life-size head can look disconcerting, so mine is to be 85% full size. This milling not only takes the drudgery out of the first stage of sculpting, getting the rough shape of the head, it goes on to cut in detail, like the lips and the eyes. This foam head already has a very good likeness, but before it can be cast in bronze, a real artist is required, and that's Adrian. So tell me, Adrian, what do you need to do to it now?
Well, the milling machine, you get computer lines on it. And first of all, what we have to do is take those lines down to bring out the form of the head.
But what are your feelings about all this? I mean, don't you feel it's taking away the skills of the artist?
In fact, I see it as helping me because it actually blocks out an accurate portrait of the head on which I can build and bring the expression out, especially in areas like the eyes, just to bring out the feeling in the actual portrait, the way it's posed, and just the basic feeling of that person.
Now, something that intrigues me is whether some of your subjects ask you to be rather, shall we say, more flattering than real life.
Certain subjects ask me if I can reduce the amount of fat under the chin, or the actual size of their nose, or the shape of the eyebrow, because every face is not symmetrical, and it needs some tuning sometimes.
Well, in that case, we'll have the bags under the eyes removed. Well, the foam head is now finished, all spots, bags and pimples have been removed, and it's ready for bronze casting. A powerful kiln melts the bronze. Meanwhile, the foam head has been used to mould a perfect inside-out hollow version in heat-proof ceramic. Any number of these moulds can be made from the original foam head. The moment of truth comes when the bronze has cooled. A final brush and polish, and I'll be ready for inspection. Well, I think it's pretty good, though I have to say it's very strange to stare at yourself like this. Now, this is already being offered as a commercial service, but there are other applications. For instance, the technique could be used to copy priceless antiques without ever the need to touch them. Or in industry and medicine, it could be used to copy difficult shapes. After all, if it can cope with me, it can cope with anything.
Well, it'll never match the real thing. Back to Howard and the telephone vote. Now, he's been looking at the technical revolution that's made it all possible.
20 years ago, telephone exchanges looked and sounded like this. Every digit dialed on the telephone moves contacts up and around until the right connection is made. Well, these electromechanical systems work remarkably well, but making a connection is only as fast as the speed of the mechanism. And in an exchange like this, it can take at least 10 seconds to connect your call. But this new digital exchange will connect you in milliseconds. There are no moving parts, just lots of microchips which switch and route the calls. And more than 75% of trunk calls use this system, and many local exchanges are being converted. But digital exchanges can also provide information about the vastly increased numbers of calls, and the network managers can keep an eye on the traffic and take actions if an overload looks likely. Well, on the map behind me, we can see all the regional digital centres around the country. Down here, for instance, is Plymouth. Plymouth and all the rest also appear on this more schematic diagram. Plymouth again down here. Here's our London exchange we're using, North Paddington, and way up the top there, the red blob EH is Edinburgh, and those lines represent the traffic between the exchanges. They are actually the 20 lines with the heaviest business on them at the moment. Now, what we're looking at here, and this is exactly at this point where if a sudden surge happened in calls, then the network managers could take some action against it. Now, this information is updated every 15 minutes, so what we're actually looking at is what happened before 6:30, before we put out the information about the calls. So if we now look at the current situation, look at that incredible change. All those lines now coming into our North Paddington. In fact, that's 6:30 to 6:45, and we did say don't call in till after that, and I happen to know that 24,500 people called in at the wrong time. Thanks a lot. Now, the process of displaying the information up there takes 11 minutes, so we're going to have to wait just for a second to see the information that we're interested in, what's happened between 6:45 and 7 o'clock. Now, this map up here also appears on the console of the network managers, and if we get over there just in time, we'll be able to see that map change. There's the network system there, and over on the right, it's just changed, I believe, and you can see that a lot of people are still ringing in that quarter of an hour period. Now, the network manager can also focus in into any of the digital exchanges around the country. And Peter here's got the North Paddington, the London Exchange up, and look at the calls. There they are going to our yes-no numbers there, the red and green lines. Over on this side, we can actually see the details. So here's the yes line, and the numbers there coming in. There's no, and we can see 40,012. We're not sure about the yes. Now, these, of course, represent only a fraction of the calls coming in from around the country, because if they were all let through, the London Exchange would be overloaded, and other people trying to use the exchange wouldn't be able to do so. So what happens is the network managers know about a phone in advance, and they can make changes. They can put in blocks, if you like, because further up the lines here in the regional centres, they'll put blocks in that only allow so many of the calls down through to London. And that's so that the blocks can maximise the number of calls down to the target number and minimise the disruption to other people trying to use that exchange. Well, let's have a look at the results of the Tomorrow's World poll. We've seen how many got down to London. We can see yes now up there as 2,794 and no as 552. But as I said, this exchange has been protected by those blocks in the regional centres, and they've held back a lot of the calls. But those calls can be actually counted by the computer. And I think, Jeff, you're having a look at Edinburgh, aren't you?
Yes, Howard. We've got a pretty even split here. I've got 2,779 yes and 2,774 no.
Oh, so undecided up in Edinburgh. What about Bristol and the southwest?
Well, Bristol were the ones that you pointed to there, 2,794 yes and 552 no.
I thought they'd changed, so very much in favour down in the southwest. What about another north one? We can go up to Manchester, can't we, Jeff?
I'm just calling up Manchester. I'll tell you the figures in just a few moments. It's a bit slow.
We would expect Manchester to perhaps be a little more ambivalent about it, wouldn't we? Well, never mind. Is it there?
Not quite.
No, OK. Well, the hardest task of all is Danny on the end, because he's had to count up the total from all the regional exchanges around the country. So have we got a final answer?
We've got a final answer for the period between 6:45 and 7 o'clock. For the yes vote, it was 271,132, and for the no, it was 86,712.
All right, so we seem to be very much in favour in British summertime all the year round. Now, to our knowledge, is that the greatest number of calls in a 15-minute period to one number?
It certainly is, Howard.
OK, well, thank you to everybody who called in and helped to test the world's largest network management system. It's still working, which is good news for Comic Relief in 10 days' time, and we'll pass on your attitudes about British summertime to the right people. Well, now, Judith.
Thank you very much, Howard. In all the recent concern about food safety, a lot of attention has been focused on microwave ovens. Are they safe? Well, there's no doubt that they can heat food hot enough to kill bacteria like Listeria. But the problem is they can also leave cold spots. I'm going to put this very hot pizza in front of this thermal camera. There it is. And you can see that it's very different round the edge. White with a little red because it's very, very hot. And then you've got the green areas, which are much colder. Though there is a red spot in the middle, that's probably a tomato, and I'll explain why that makes it hotter in the centre in a minute. Now, one reason why cold spots occur is the shape of the food. Microwaves don't pass far into the food, and it takes time for heat to spread from the outside in. The second factor is what the food is made of, particularly how moist it is, hence the tomato. Microwaves themselves aren't hot. They're similar to radio waves, and they're only converted to heat by the molecules in food. Watery food is better at this conversion, which is why it's so easy to burn your mouth on the filling of a microwave pie. But there is another reason why foods don't cook evenly. In the oven itself, some spots become much hotter than others. As you'll see, if I put this tray of now very liquid egg white into here and switch it on. Our graphics show how microwaves enter the cavity from here and then bounce around the oven, sometimes adding energy, but sometimes cancelling each other out. Normally, turntables or rotating reflectors are fitted to even out the effects of the heat and avoid cold spots. But in here, we switched the turntable off, and the result, as you can see, uneven cooking. But the situation is even more complicated because the food itself moves the cold spots, something that's demonstrated by new research at Nottingham University using these computer models. This is the oven empty, and here are the hot spots with cold spots in between, which move when a sponge pudding is added, as do the cold spots, as you've seen. And the waves pass more slowly through the sponge, which alters where that heat builds up. And different types of food affect the cold spots differently, so microwave manufacturers can't design ovens to smooth out all the effects, though it is hoped that this research will lead to better designs. But perhaps the ultimate answer to dangerous cold spots is this: designer microwave food. One large company is now testing pies like this, shaped like donuts, to eliminate those tricky-to-reach centres. And they're also considering pockets of sauces, strategically placed to help heat the middle of dishes. For now, the best advice is to microwave food for at least the recommended time, then leave it standing to let the heat spread and make sure it's piping hot, even in the middle. And if you don't like the shape of things to come, what about home cooking? Peter?
Well, that should do for a sample there. You know, every vehicle on the road, even this monster, needs one part of the engine regularly changed, and that is the oil. Sludge and metal, even water and antifreeze that leaks into there, can all contaminate the oil and spoil its performance. And that's why oil changes are recommended every 6,000 or 12,000 miles. But these standard distances are deceptive. The amount of punishment your engine gives the oil can vary. The trouble is you can't tell just by looking at it how many miles it has left. It doesn't take long for a sump oil to look as mucky as this. But here's a little device which could give you an instant idea of just how contaminated your oil is. At the bottom of this well here are two tiny spirals of copper that measure an electrical property of liquid called its dielectric constant. Now, this constant in fresh clean oil is very low, and we've already calibrated this instrument with a sample of clean oil. This device will now compare any further tests against that reading. So if I take some of that out of there, just wipe the gunge off the end there, and put it into this well here. Now, any metal particles or other contaminants in there will alter the electrical properties of the sample, and this is picked up by the device and shown as a reading on this scale. So let's take that reading here. And if that reading does go into the red, then the oil really needs changing. If it stays in the green, then we're okay. Now, if you can look on that there, you can just see that the reading is in fact just well into the green, just at that point there. So, judging from this, I think this oil has a good few miles still left in it.
In the latest edition of the science magazine Nature, researchers report that the nose could provide important insights into Alzheimer's disease, the commonest cause of senile dementia. At the moment, no one knows what causes Alzheimer's, and it can only be diagnosed for certain after death by taking sections of brain and looking for characteristic tangles and plaques. A few years ago, it was noticed that sufferers from this disease often lost their sense of smell. And when scientists examined nerve cells at the back of the nose from patients who had died of the disease, they found the same sort of tangles and plaques.
so it may soon be possible to check for Alzheimer's by taking a small sample of living tissue from the nose, which would then help researchers pinpoint the causes of this disease. And nasal nerve cells could also help find a treatment. They're the only nerve cells which come from the brain that continuously regenerate. So, for the first time, it may be possible to study Alzheimer's in tissue samples grown in the lab, which would dramatically speed up research into a cure.
At this week's Nordic Ski Championships, an unusual form of blood testing has been going on. For the first time, competitors have been tested to see if they have been blood boosting. That is, pumping extra red blood cells into their bodies prior to an event to add to their endurance ability. Red blood cells carry oxygen, and studies have shown that blood boosting can give endurance gains of about 5%, which can be the difference between first and 10th place. The International Olympic Committee outlawed the practice in 1986 after the American Olympic Committee admitted that 7 members of their cycling team at the 1984 Olympics did just this, including 1 gold medal winner. But it's still thought to be the commonest form of cheating in sports like cross-country skiing and long-distance running. The new tests can detect both of the methods used for blood boosting. Some athletes have their own blood taken weeks before the race and then keep it frozen. The body compensates by producing more young red cells. Just before the race, the old red cells are added back again. This cheating can be picked up by detecting an abnormal number of new cells. Alternatively, athletes use someone else's blood. This is detected by looking for foreign red cells. Now, this sort of testing is still at a very early stage, but athletes and officials are saying it's a big step forward.
Designs of a new concept vehicle have recently been revealed, and this one's destined for the moon. Unlike the dune buggy that American astronauts drove on the moon in the early 70s, the new lunar vehicles would be remotely controlled from Earth. But they'd have a limited ability to react independently to their surroundings with robotic arms to do repetitive tasks. They're intended as construction vehicles for a radio telescope NASA proposes building on the dark side of the moon, where it would be shielded by the moon from man-made radio interference. Building it would take 2 years, and work, if it's to go ahead, would start early in the next century.
A Californian biologist has recently patented a way of keeping worms in suspended animation and then bringing them back to life again. The tiny parasitic nematode worms are used in pest control. They track down and kill the larval stages of crop-eating insects. Several US labs have been breeding the worms, but the problem has always been how to transport them in large numbers. When packed together, they die. The solution? Remove 90% of their body water by osmosis. In this state, the worms can survive for over a month, so they can be packed up and taken to wherever they're needed. Then just add water, stir, and a few minutes later, the worms are as good as new.
We're always being warned about the dangers of sunbathing. It can make you old before your time, and it can also severely increase the risk of skin cancer. But this cream has been causing something of a stir in the medical world. It's normally used to treat acne, but recently it's been found to have other remarkable properties which could reverse some of the problems caused by too much sun, including perhaps even the early stages of skin cancer. Now, it is worth emphasising that this is not a suntan lotion. These work by blocking out the sun's ultraviolet rays. This is a derivative of vitamin A called tretinoin, and it's been used to treat acne since the early 70s. Well, gradually people using it began to notice that their skin was improving in more ways than one. Not only were their spots vanishing, their wrinkles were too. Intrigued by this, several research groups in America started to use the cream on patients whose skin had been wrinkled by too much sun. Now, this is one man before the treatment, and here's the same man just 16 weeks later. One team from the University of Michigan then began to study changes in the skin cells and noticed that any which beforehand were growing in an irregular way and which might have become malignant, like the ones in this lesion, went back to being normal again after being treated with tretinoin. This work has been picked up by research groups throughout Europe and America, who've also seen an improvement in the early stages of skin cancers. They reported their findings at a recent conference in the south of France, and several doctors are now recommending this treatment. At the moment, these early precancerous cells are removed by freezing with an instrument like this, but a cream would be much more convenient. Now, no one knows yet just how tretinoin works, and the scientists do warn that if any of this family of chemicals, which are known as retinoids, are given to a patient who already has a cancerous tumour, then they could actually make the condition worse. Obviously, a great deal more research still needs to be done. But these initial results do raise the prospect of a new treatment for the early stages of some skin cancers. Until then, this will only be available from your doctor as a humble acne lotion. And now, here's Howard.
Delft Market is a very pleasant place to shop if you're in Holland, but like in most countries, the small shop is giving way to the giant supermarket. For all their convenience, if there's one thing I can't stand, it's the checkout queue. This is just a Monday afternoon, and we all know what it can be like on a Saturday morning. But this new supermarket in Tilburg must be the only one in Europe where its regular customers don't need to worry about that. I'm going to have to check this out. And I can, on my own. My trolley has a personal barcode reader, which means that I can check out my shopping as I go along. And it gives me a running total too. But if I change my mind about something, all I have to do is cancel it and put it back on the shelf. Inside the scanner, there's an optical chip which records the barcode, deciphers it, and sends it to the electronics in here. Now, they contain all the barcodes in the store, about 20,000 of them, along with the price. Now, an infrared beam runs the length of the trolley, so if I put something in without registering it, it waits a couple of seconds and then gives me a friendly warning, and then I'd register it. However, there is a way of cheating, because if I put 2 items in at once, wait for the warning, and then register just the 1 item, well, I might get away with it. Surprisingly, though, the manager here says that it's not a great problem, no greater a problem than with ordinary shopping. So perhaps the Dutch are more honest. But the shop does make some checks as the customer leaves. When the scanner is handed in for payment at a special counter, it's linked to the cashier's computer. Any items that have been counted into the basket but not correctly recorded on the scanner are highlighted. Usually it's items that the customer knows they've had some problem with when registering the barcode, an awkward shape perhaps, or there may be some query over the price, and it's simply rectified on the final account. There we are. Now, these trolleys are only available to regular customers who get a special membership card. But avoiding the queues isn't the only advantage to this system, because these removable boxes are on deposit, which means that instead of having to unload all the shopping and then repacking afterwards, these goods don't have to be handled again until I get home.
Well, that's all from us in the studio, but I believe that Howard is still hanging on.
Yes, I am. As you can see, the map has changed again. This is now what happened after 7 o'clock, and still people are phoning into that number. Those 2 numbers, please stop phoning in. They want their exchange back. Let's look at the final results. We have them up on the board now. Very much a definite yes in favour of British summertime all year round. Thanks to everybody who helped us out. That's all from Tomorrow's World for this week. We'll be back at the same time next week. Good night.
Thank you.